Hello. Reginald the salesperson here again today to offer you two-dimensional pumpkins. Do you simply not have space for those full-sized regular pumpkins this year? Well, come on down for our exclusive two-dimensional pumpkins, not 3D. Yes, they are very cheap, only $43.99 for one, or if you get two, they will be $199. What a bargain! And you can even get white ones to represent either white pumpkins, or you can color them to any rainbow psychedelic combination of colors you desire this fall. So come on down to Reginald's for two-dimensional pumpkins. Oh yes, hello again. I demand a refund. Well, you said you sell two-dimensional pumpkins. This one is clearly three-dimensional. I didn't even notice it until I got home. Oh. I mean, I can't even hang it on the wall. We do not look at this. Refunds. Maybe I can make an exception in this instance. Customers are the worst. Three-dimensional pumpkins, $200. Very unique three-dimensional types. Much more exciting than two-dimensional pumpkins. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Don't Eat the Art. Today, you should have a nice hot cup of cocoa or hot toddy, tea, cider, whatever you want in a nice cup, because we just got a cold front with some rain. Fall is officially here, I think. We'll see. This is Oklahoma, so anyway, cuddle up with your closest pumpkin buddy and your nice hot drink and sit back and relax. Some old footage that this has never been seen before in real time. I had once posted this super sped up. So this is it for those of you who might want to see how this grain elevator painting came to be in real time, because I'm going to have some tips and how I went about doing this throughout the video. Or you could put it on mute, put your favorite music on, just sit back and you know, enjoy watching a painting happening with whatever soothing background noises you want. So I didn't get to do any filming of new stuff this week because I had oral surgery. Those are the remnants of a tooth. Yes, one tooth in here. It's about 10 pieces of what they could save. And I had a sick toddler. She's doing much better now, and so am I. But we kind of ran out of filming time. But I hope you enjoy getting to see this come to be in real time for the first time ever. And I thought the colors were nice and fall-like to welcome in the season. And so, are you ready to get comfy? Just don't eat any art. If you bring any snacks and you're gonna paint while you watch this, just don't eat it. Tastes like fall. Spicy. Alright, so here we're getting ready to add some paint. We've already got the canvas gessoed and dried. And got to pick that first knife, and I'm going to go with the plain old palette knife. Because we've got some lead white and some phthalo blue. Now the tricky thing with any of the phthalos, there's green and well, different greens and blues and whatevers. They're really transparent, so if you want to have like that pure color covering a large surface, it's kind of tricky to work with. They're a little runny and thin, but the pigment is so strong. Oh my goodness, they are so strong. So if you're mixing up a sky like I am here, it really takes just a tiny bit of that phthalo blue and you're good. Sometimes I'll make it more intense to get a nice electric color. That's always fun. But a little tube of that goes a long ways. Prussian blue is the same way too, but it may be, I can't remember, it might be a phthalo based thing. And see, I mixed it with the palette knife, and then I'm going ahead and putting it directly onto the canvas with a palette knife. You can do that, you know, if you want to paint with that. The only tricky thing is, you'll notice the palette knife is like just a straight blade set in a handle, so it's really nice for mixing on the palette, but for painting it's a little easier to get your thumb or part of your hand touching the paint. So you'll notice the painting knives have, a bend in them, so before it gets into the handle, and that's so you have a little bit more room for your hand to not get stuck in your paint. Getting a little more lead white here. Titanium white works too if you're really concerned about the lead white or are having trouble finding it. And titanium white is much brighter. It's a very beautiful white, but the problem is over time it's going to likely start having issues, as it's going to be prone to cracking. It's usually mixed with zinc, and that has major cracking issues down the road. So if you're looking at having your paintings around for a couple hundred years or whatever, maybe just stick with the lead white. But if you're just wanting to try this out and see if you even like oil painting or whatever, then go ahead and use the titanium, but just keep that in mind. So here we have a very nice giant painting knife. That one might have actually been sold as a palette knife, I can't remember. But this is very much like those cake frosting tools. In fact, this same series has one very much shaped like what I typically see as the standard cake frosting tool. So much longer one, and I'll get one of those eventually, but for now this is working great. So I think these are about 16 or 17 bucks. I may have been getting a deal on those, I can't remember. I mean, I've never bought a cake frosting knife, but I assume they're most likely going to be a lot cheaper than these palette knives, at least most of them. So if you need a cheap alternative, go get you one of those. But I got this real knife, so that's what I'm using. Now you'll see, I'm not putting on a ton at a time with this. I mean, it kind of seems like I am, but you could really load up a big blob of paint on this and cover a lot of ground. So if you're working on a giant canvas or something, these are going to be awesome, save you a lot of time. Now you'll see I did a little texturing there, as I wanted to indicate some, even though it's a cloudless sky, I kind of wanted to give a little texture to some of those little wavy clouds you see sometimes up in the sky, just to kind of imply the presence of clouds at some point in time. Now, here you'll see I am wiping off the tool because it is very important to wipe off your painting knives and palette knives when you're doing this kind of painting, because with brushes you can kind of get away with just sometimes with just wiping off a little bit, and you're not going to get too much in the paint. But with these, if you still have, like if I went ahead and didn't wipe off all that blue paint and decided to put on some yellow or orange or something, you're gonna get streaks of blue and green in your yellow and orange that you may not want, and it may even start really mixing where it gets kind of just this muddy brownish color. So to avoid muddying and just unwanted streaks like that, just wipe off your knives. Here we're getting some more lead white. Yeah, this makes me think of frosting when I'm doing this, because it's a lot like frosting a cake depending on your technique, and you could get it really smooth or you could do it really textured like I'm doing. And I swear, just mixing this in, I'm just like, oh, that looks like icing. And I am a huge fan of frosting, which might be partly why I had to have a tooth cut out of my head recently. So if you're like me and adore frosting and other sweet goods, take really good care of your teeth so that you can keep them in your head. I mean, look at that. Just nice vanilla frosting. So good. Don't eat this though, especially because this is lead paint. Don't, yeah. I mean, never eat this stuff, but especially the lead. Just don't eat that. It's amazing how heavy the lead paint is. I mean, it makes sense, but I was a little surprised the first time I got some. I was like, wow, this weighs way more than any of my other paint. Now see how I placed the white down and spread it around a bit before working up into the blue. That way, that saved me having to wipe my knife that time. Because once, I was planning on mixing anyway, but, I could have done some mixing and then wiped it off and then done some pure white. But why do extra work when you don't have to? Yeah, it's always fun when you're going along, it's these nice smooth strokes, and then against the canvas. For some reason, I personally just don't like that sound, so it's ugh. Yeah, and soften that line just a little bit. I just felt it was a little too strong. And you saw I kind of scraped the side of my knife off on the edge of the canvas there. You can do that to get some of the extra paint off and then mix that into what you're doing, or I sometimes will just leave them there. If I feel they look nice, I'll leave it there. Now this is the cadmium lemon light. I think that's the word. It's cadmium and it's light, and it has the word lemon in there somewhere. But this is a rather expensive pigment, but a small tube of it goes a long ways. And I find that, for me, it's my favorite yellow to use in sunsets and sunrises. It's just really intense. And it's similar to the phthalo blue, where you really only need a little bit of it in the white to have this nice popping pale yellow. And then you can have little bits where you have more of that yellow in there just to give it some extra pop if you want. There, I almost had that, and then I decided I wanted to mix it in a little more. It's a great color to have. But if you don't want to spend the money on that nice poppy yellow, a light cadmium. The cadmiums are a little pricey too, but not as much as that lemon one. And just having a light cadmium yellow can do you a lot of good. But I just especially like that lemon for extra pop. Now the orange I mixed in there, you saw the bare color briefly, is Orient Lake. I'll have to double check the brand. This is one of my nicer pigments. I think I paid for the small bottle like over $30 and it was on sale. But it's another one that's gone a long ways. I did 3 paintings of Bryce Canyon where I used the rocks, used this paint, mainly this color for the rocks. 2 of those, well, one was a 30 by 40, this is in inches, one was a 36 by 48, and one was like a 24 by 36, something like that. And I've used it in lots of sunsets, sunrises, stuff like that. It's gone a long ways. It's a great color. And one of the cool things about it is you saw that nice, rich, rusty orange it comes out of the tube as. That's just a nice color. But when you mix it with white, instead of it just turning to like a paler orange, it turns this pale yellow. And even though it's a pastel color, it still has this nice vibrance to it. So it's really just a great color to have. You can get so many tones just with this one color and a little bit of white with it. I mean, this whole array. I mean, I guess most colors you can do that, but to me, I just really liked that it was so vibrant at all stages. Now, right here I'm adding I'll have to double check the color. It's some crimson red. I think it's one of the, it's either rose red or crimson something. I'm pretty sure it's one of those that's light fast though. There are some of the reddish or pinkish red colors that are not very light fast, so you want to watch out for those. But I think the one I used for this was supposed to be pretty steady. Anyway, I mixed a little bit of that in there just because that orange is really nice, but sunsets and sunrises, they always have like this little, even on the oranger bits, there's still this feeling of pink, at least for my eyes. So I always try to add just a tiny bit of that, and it just gives it a little more richness, I think.
James doing this.
There, I'm adding a few other touches to it. Just always want to sit back and, get the whole image in front of you, step back from it, because you'll often notice other things when you step back like that, and, don't get so focused on the little details. I love this knife. It's shaped like a ginkgo tree leaf, which is my favorite species of tree. They're so cool. Funny thing is, or one of the interesting things is, if you ever look at the shape or the veins of the ginkgo leaf, this is the last remaining species of tree alive from, of course dinosaurs were around at the time, and it's like the last of the original form, I guess. I'm not really into botany, but I do know that instead of having this main beam in the middle of the leaf with little veins branching off of that, if you look at the ginkgo leaf, it's like all these little veins branching out just from the stem base itself. Gives it a totally cool look, and I guess that's how the early trees used to all be, and then at some point they got the main beam with the veins coming off. Anyway, I had added some purple in the sky there, and you can see I just kind of lightly brushed it in, and even though I made it look a little bit like clouds, it's kind of like what I did with the texturing, where with the texturing I gave some indication through texture the shape of some clouds present at some time. And here I did it with color. I didn't make it very defined as clouds, so it's up to the viewer to decide if it's if it's actually clouds or was clouds, or if it's simply just the sky turning dark as it turns to night. I kind of like doing that sort of thing from time to time. Here I'm dipping into that. I cleaned off my knife, and then I dipped into the just straight up lemon yellow for the sun. So as I really wanted that almost neon, just like wow. So I did that, and this was a great knife for doing a large roundy thing like the sun. Now I'm going to add a little bit of white, and this is to help give it some more highlights to help it pop even more. But one thing that's interesting is, even though I'm not really doing shading here, the fact that there are two tones there kind of interacting with each other and blending some gives it a feel that it's almost more three-dimensional. I'm not quite sure how that works, but I've noticed for me, like if there's multiple colors present on a single color object, even if it's not arranged as proper shading or something, my brain will often interpret it as more three-dimensional. And here's our reference photo again, just as a reminder. Well, I guess you guys didn't see it at the beginning, but that's our reference photo. Ta-da! I took that in my hometown of Garber, Oklahoma, a long time ago. It's still just a photo I really like, and then I was looking at it one day, I was like, hey, I can paint that. Now this is a funky knife. It's shaped much like one of your more traditional painting knives, but if you look closely, you'll see two slots in it, and that gives some different effects. So as you pull the knife along, it'll also pull paint through those little holes, so it might push things differently or squeeze some paint through one way or another, and it'll create these little lines in your stroke. So depending on how you do it, you might have, like, say, so here we have this thick thing of black. You know, I'd be laying some black down, and there might be two little white lines in the middle from what was scraped back from the background. And this is our telephone pole I'm adding here. Oh, and right here, I think, yeah, I'm using just a regular palette knife. So you'll see it's the same. So this is the traditional one I was referring to, that it's this traditional little palette knife, standard shape, has no slits. And then the other one's basically the same shape but has these slits. Yeah, here it is again. I did the old switcheroo. Ha ha ha. Here I'm adding some bushes and trees. Bushes and trees, come and get some bushes and trees. Wanted to have a few in front of the sun, even though it's clearly setting. I thought just having little those trees would help pull it down lower to the ground anyway. It also put the sun more in the back by adding just a little bit of vegetation in front of it, whereas before it seemed like it was really in the front. And I did add a little bit of that Orient Lake color on the black. Not much. I just wanted to kind of get, you know, when you look at something, even though it's in silhouette and it's all black, especially with plants and stuff, you'll see a bit of an orange glow, and it's usually more intense than this, but I didn't want to have that intense stuff, but I kind of wanted to still hint a little bit of that glow, to kind of bring out that warm evening sunlight. So I put a little bit orange there on the side like that. Okay, maybe I added a lot of orange over there on the side. Doo-doo-doo. And I decided that was a little too strong on the orange, so I went back with some black. Alright, now we're gonna do the big deal, the grain elevator, the skyscraper of America. I see I really hesitated because this was a big moment. You know, once I add that black, I can't undo it. So I had to be really sure where I wanted it. And then also trying to keep that line nice and straight. And this is also tricky, deciding how I wanted to do this, since, you know, what's so striking about these sunset photos, or, you know, how it's contrasted with the silhouette of the subject. And I didn't want to just have this static, solid silhouette, because that's just not my style, as you know. So I spent, yeah, you could see me pausing a lot, just trying to figure out exactly how I wanted to go about making this grain elevator feel as solid and static as it actually is, but still have the lightness and the saccades of my style. Okay, there I'm adding the saccade of the top of the grain elevator. You know, I used to only really use this particular knife I'm holding for tubing paint, because I'll buy large jars of paint and tubes separately, and then I'll sit there and tube it myself. So I don't know if you noticed that those didn't have big brand labels or anything on them when I was squirting some tape out, and there were some handwritten sticky labels on them. That's why. And this particular knife is great for tubing the large tubes. But I think as of this may have been the first painting I really started leaning on this knife a lot just for painting with. There, I'm adding the antenna. So this is great for straight edges. So you can see I was showing off the bottom where I have just a little bit of black paint loaded along the edge. And what I wanted to point out there was that it's I try to make it a fairly even strip of paint loaded up on there. So you'll have to kind of look at it, scrape just a little on there, maybe pull it a certain way to load it, and then check. Because if you have a big blob in the middle part and it's thinner towards the edges, you're going to not get a straight line when you pull that knife through. So I very carefully kept it straight and pulled it through and got a pretty even edge. I mean, that second one was a little fatter just because of the way the texture was in the background, I think. But here I'm adding the poles for that attach the grain elevator to the little storage silos. There, I showed again. That was a thicker, slightly more uneven blob, but it wasn't going to be as big a deal here just because it was a wider thing. So there's more margin for error. Whereas the really thin ones you have to be especially careful with, because if it's a wide one you can always go back with a little bit more paint and even things out, but with something thin that's going to be a lot trickier. Okay, and then I just showed I had just a tiny bit of paint here. And this was pretty tricky, where I had a little bit of, like a little tiny strip of paint along the very edge of it, and that's how I'm doing these really thin black lines. And again, it's always easier to, if you want them a little thicker, to go back and make them thicker, but you can't really go the other way around. Yeah, and these knives like this are just perfect for this, but in pretty much any of them, I think, with the straight edge like that, if it's, like one of the diamond-shaped ones we were using earlier, those could work really well for this, but this one, I don't know, it just fits well in my hand. I like how it feels, and so this is what I'm using for a lot of this sort of thing. Oh, there you could see I had it thicker on the back. I think I might have just wiped it off. There, I don't know if you could see just how much paint was on there, but I got a big load to add more to the top of the elevator there. So I felt it just needed more of that. But if you've noticed too, I've been cleaning my knife a lot during this part, because I really don't want to, I just want to have as much of just the black onto the background as I could. Didn't want a bunch of mixing. Obviously there's going to be some mixing just the way with the nature of things, but cleaning it ensures that it's as clean as you can possibly get. I just wanted to have a little bit more of a rounded edge there for the top of the silo. And then this is just a perfect knife for this shape. If you ever look at grain elevators, it's, well, when I was a kid, I used to take toilet paper rolls and glue or tape them together to make little grain elevators. So I always think of that when I see these now, like toilet paper rolls. But seriously, it's like these roundy shapes, like these cylinders kind of stuck together. And I've always liked that shape, and so I really wanted to be sure I showed that off in my painting, because that's just a key shape for these grain elevators. And it's just nice contrast too with the more squared off silhouette of the side of it. Now we're going to pull this down a bit because I wanted to accentuate the height of the building. There we go. And then I wanted to show the tower part again as well. Could hear me sigh there, just like, oh, done with that part. So I was really holding my breath. And another saccade at the top of it. And that really kind of rounds out the composition nicely up there. And then one more stroke to kind of imply more of the side of the building and show off its height. Now this is a really, really cool knife. I love it. What you're going to see, so remember, if you've seen these buildings, the silos attached to the grain elevators are made of metal. It's like tin, and it's that corrugated tin. So there are all those little waves in it, and those are really obvious, especially in a sunset. They really reflect a lot of light and then have the strong shadows contrasting, so I really wanted to have that there. So what I did was I loaded it up with black paint, and I have it turned to where I'm putting it down on the smooth side of the knife. So they were just pasting on a bunch of black, and then see how I just turned it the other way. I never lifted up. It was all part of the same stroke, I guess, because it never lifted. I had it going one way, got to where I wanted to go, and then turned it opposite and drug the wavy edge back through what we had just put down with the smooth edge. And that's how I got that nice look there. And then here in the next spot, I'm simply going with the wavy edge only because I wanted it to be a little lighter there and reflecting even more light. So, oh, and I forgot I added a little bit of texture there on the roof of the silo. There, now that one I really just lightly drug it. So the other one I was pressing a little more, so more of the knife was touching it, so that's why there was more black. And this one, I just lightly drug only the teeth through. And so that's how I got the look of just those little stripes, as there were so many gaps not touching, gaps from the knife not touching the paint. So that's 3 different things you can do with that knife, all in one. Now I wanted to add the power lines. So well, that's more of the pole, so I added just a little bit. But see, I ran out of paint there, and then I decided instead of loading it up again, I didn't want any more black. So I was like, I just wanted that tiny bit there at the base of it, and then the rest of it I'm doing with no paint loaded on it. You'll see a bit of a blob there, but I think that's just the paint coming off of the background as we drag the knife through. And so it's kind of like I'm drawing or etching directly into the paint to get these shapes I want, but they're not going to be overpowering because there's not any color associated with them. Oh, I see. I think I drug through a particular spot that I didn't want to have drug through, so I went back and tried to pat things back into place. Not really easy, but I guess it worked. Just a little bit more of those shapes. Help guide the eye, while also representing the actual power lines. How handy. And I just wanted to round that top a little bit because I thought it was a little sloppy. And then flattening those out a little bit more. Just the ridges on the roof. Again, always remember to just step back and make sure there aren't any last little touches that you need to do. And there you go. There's the grain elevator. Oh, yep, here I'm showing the different paints. Oh, that wasn't a crimson red, that was an RGH brand red, and there's the cremnitz white, which is a lead white. It's just extra thick, and there's the phalo blue I like, and oh, it was just cadmium yellow light. Silly me. So you could use, yeah, you could use that just fine instead of the lemon yellow I forgot I was using the RGH brand. I really like that brand. Maybe that was just appearing a little brighter to me than normal. But I will use that lemon yellow a lot. And I can't see the numbers on those, so I'll put those numbers down in the description for you. But we used that nice wavy knife. These are the New Age knives. I can't remember the company name right now, but so far as I know, it's the only company that makes all these crazy knives. They're like over 50 different ones, something like that. And I get them from Blick. I'm sure other places carry them as well. But I've just slowly been getting some and trying them out. And there was one in particular I thought I was never really going to use much, and I ended up using it a whole bunch. So, and then there's of course the standard old-fashioned palette knife that's always useful to have. And then there's a more traditional palette knife, kind of like the one with the slits in it that we used. So there you go. Oh yeah, and this one, it's I use that one a lot too. It's kind of like a little flower petal or something. And then of course the one to make delicious art with. Don't eat it. But you can cover a lot of ground with that. Anyway, happy fall, everyone.